week 8 of the fantasy football season, and here's tight end starter sit every matchup this week. The first matchup, Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Mark Andrews coming off the worst game possibly of his career, where he only had 4 rushing yards. He didn't even catch a pass in that ball game. You're still going to go out there. You're still going to start him. I think he's not 100% obviously, and he gutted it out for the Baltimore Ravens. And plus that Cleveland Brown defense, they held Lamar Jackson down in the passing game in that one. So right here, they had a good game plan for Andrews, and plus that he wasn't 100% helped them as well. But right here, you still got to go out there and start Andrews in your lineup. Now to the Tampa side of things, borderline option Cade Otton possibly might crack my top 12 this week anyway at the tight end position, but right now I got him as a borderline option. I know in 2 expanded roles and starts this season, he's had double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, so right now that's a good thing to see. He's a borderline option in this ball game on Thursday Night Football. Denver Broncos at the Jaguars. Greg Dulcich so far in 2 starts in his NFL career here, coming back in week 6, double-digit fantasy points, and also 13 targets in that time. So right here, Dulcich still available in tons of fantasy leagues on the waiver wire, and he is a borderline option this week here. But he's a guy, if you're going to roll with him, I'm fine with it, to be honest, because he's getting the targets, he's making the plays, and Albert O is the big preseason hype guy at the tight end position. But he's been a healthy scratch the last 2 weeks, so it's Greg Dulcich's job right now in Denver. Now to Jacksonville, Evan Ingram, he's starting to have a big role over there in this Jacksonville offense. A couple weeks in a row now with good fantasy games, and this week here again, he's going to have a good one. I think he's second on the team pretty much in that offense. They're pretty much Christian Kirk and him in the passing game, and this team's trying to play quicker now with Travis Etienne being the full-time running back, with James Robinson traded to the New York Jets. And Evan Ingram fits that mold of a quick up-tempo offense and a guy that Trevor Lawrence definitely trusts. So this week, I got Ingram as a start. Now to the Cardinals at the Minnesota Vikings. Zach Ertz, it was his worst game of the season with 6.10 fantasy points in week 7. I don't know if I had to do with Hopkins or just the lack of targets in that ball game. But anyway, here, Zach Ertz is still a guy I'm going to start each and every week. This season, he's got 6 ball games with 10 or more fantasy points. So that was his worst game with the 6.10 in week 7 versus New Orleans Saints. But you're still going out there and starting them at a weak tight end position. Now to Irv Smith Jr. Irv Smith Jr., it's been one good game, one bad game type of pattern each week here. But now coming off the bye week, maybe Irv Smith's a little bit healthy, coming off the off-season injury and into the season probably not 100%. So this week in a decent matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals, I got him as a borderline option. We saw Juwan Johnson score 2 touchdowns, and the Cardinals do give up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So right here, Irv Smith Jr. as a borderline guy this week. But if you started him, I don't think it's a horrible option as well. Now to the Miami Dolphins at the Detroit Lions. So Mike Gesicki, a great ball game a couple weeks ago with 2 touchdowns versus the Minnesota Vikings, but he didn't do much in the week 7 matchup. 7 targets was still good target share to see here from Mike Gesicki, but he's been an inconsistent tight end all season, and I'll put him in the category with Robert Tonyan. We'll have one monster game, then he'll disappear with a 5-6 point game for a few weeks in a row. Then he'll have that big blow-up game. So right now he's too inconsistent. This tight end position is getting a little stronger over the last few weeks in fantasy football. And Mike Gesicki, I have his sit this week. TJ Hawkinson, we know he's had that one blow-up game over 35 fantasy points. But besides that, he's pretty much been a guy in PPR leagues around anywhere 7 to 10 fantasy points. But I think he can make some plays in this game. We saw Pat Freiermuth just go for a good ball game, over 15 fantasy points versus Dolphin defense. And right now, if Amon St. Brown's out, it's just going to be more targets going Hawkinson's way. So I got him as a start, even if Amon's playing or not playing in this one, because he's a big target for this team and a tight end that can make plays. Now the Bears at the Cowboys. Cole Kmet, he really hasn't done much this season. A lot of preseason hype, but it's Justin Fields pretty much running the football the majority of the time. We're throwing it to Mooney or his running back. So right here, Cole Kmet, you can't trust him. Too many better options at tight end, and he's a sit. And Dalton Schultz last week, I don't know how we got through that ball game, but he was limping most of that game, playing through it. Dak Prescott and him have a good rapport, obviously, from last season. And with Dak back, he might have some fantasy value now as Dalton Schultz, but he don't look 100% healthy. He's not really running all the great routes with the leg injury for Dalton Schultz. And this week here, I have him as a sit once again. If he could show that he's healthy and have a breakout ball game, then I'll reconsider next week. Now to the Raiders at the New Orleans Saints. Darren Waller, he missed the ball game surprisingly in week 7 after coming off a bye week. But obviously, if he plays, I'm going to give him one more opportunity in a good matchup versus the New Orleans Saints here. Is Darren Waller if he plays, because a lot of people took him 3rd, 4th round of their fantasy drafts here, and he's a guy that still could have value later on in the season or even in this game, and a guy that it's hard to just give up on him and not expect much. And now Foster Monroe, if Waller's out in this game, he's a borderline option, more in deeper leagues. Monroe, we didn't see much from him in that ball game versus the Houston Texans in week 7, but Monroe, we've seen games out of him last season when Waller's out. We put up good fantasy numbers, but right now, he's a guy at best that's borderline, even if Waller is out. Taysom Hill, I'll give him a start in this game. Last week, 10 fantasy points, qualifies at quarterback and tight end, and they're still using Hill in different packages. I know Jameis Winston might come back in this ball game, and things might be different where they don't use Hill, but Hill is a gadget guy, a guy to throw some passes here and there, running short yardage plays, and even catch a ball or two maybe a game. Is a guy I still would plug in at the tight end position. In the back end this week, Jawan Johnson I have as a sit. We've seen this from Jawan Johnson in the past where he'll have a big ball game and then weeks on end he disappears. And the two things about that is Adam Trautman was out in that game versus the Cardinals, so Johnson was the number 1 tight end. And also the Cardinals give up a lot of fantasy points to tight end, so it's just a good matchup in general. But this week here, I still can't trust him, and I have him as a sit. Hunter Henry and the New England Patriots go to the New York Jets. So Hunter Henry, a borderline option. 2 weeks in a row, he had good ball games. But in week 7, he came up with a dud. And this is what I mean. This Patriot offense is just inconsistent. Everyone was ready to anoint Bailey Zapp, especially after he came in week 7 from relief, down 10-0 and gave him the 14-10 lead. But that whole second half of the game, that bad defense made him look like a mediocre to poor quarterback. So right here, still can't trust Hunter Henry. I know he had good games in week 5 and 6, but he's a borderline option at best. Now to Tyler Conklin, he was great the first 3 weeks of the season with Joe Flacco, getting double-digit fantasy points in every ball game. But right now here with Zach Wilson, this passing attack has done nothing, and it's been running the football and defense, winning the Jets game. So Tyler Conklin's a guy off the radar and a guy to sit this week. Now the Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. So Tommy Tremble, I know he had a touchdown in that ball game, but it was only his catch. I know this is a decent matchup versus the Panthers, but this week here, I just can't trust any Panther tight end. PJ Walker, that was his best game of his early NFL career here, and he's not really looking for the tight end. Dean Thomas, he hasn't done anything in weeks. He's a sit. And Tremble with the fluky touchdown is a sit as well. Now to Kyle Pitts, it's very concerning here for Kyle Pitts and this whole Falcon passing game in general. Now we're here to week 8. I know Kyle Pitts was a hype draft pick for many fantasy owners, but to be honest, there's guys on the waiver wire or just coming off the waiver wire this week who've been better than a Kyle Pitts. Greg Dulcich has been better in the 2 games we've seen him. Irv Smith Jr. has even been more consistent, believe it or not, than a Kyle Pitts. And even Robert Tonyan, who I'm not big on after the dud performance and a tough matchup this week, has been better than Kyle Pitts. So right now, no one in that Falcon offense I really could trust, and he's a sit this week. I know you put a big draft pick on him, but it's week 8 already. If you got to win, I don't think you could trust Pitts in this situation. Now to the Steelers at the Eagles. So Patrick, one of the favorite targets at Kenny Pickett, his security blanket, coming off a concussion. And in week 7, he had a great game. 8 catches, 75 yards for Muth. So he's an each and every week start pretty much. He's a guy that's a good possession tight end. He's going to get catches, and you know the volume's going to be there week in and week out, and especially if they're chasing points. So he's a starter. Now to the Eagles, Dallas Goedert. He's a top 4, top 5 tight end each and every week. Him and Hurts have a good rapport. He's putting up double digits most weeks than not here, and he's a no-brainer start. Now to the Titans at the Houston Texans. Austin Hooper, he really hasn't done anything this season here, and a guy not on the radar, he's a sit. And out to the Texan side of things, O.J. Howard had that big pop game in week 1, but I just don't expect much out of him as well. And Jordan Akins, he had a decent ball game versus the Raiders in week 7, but that's a fluky type of ball game, and I got him as a sit as well, so no tight ends in this one are used. Now to the Giants at the Seattle Seahawks. So Daniel Bellinger, he's going to be out a while and possibly the season with his eye pretty much raked out. He had an eye socket fracture and accept them. So he's going to be out a long time. And Daniel Bellinger was starting to get fantasy value and a favorite target of Daniel Jones. Now Chris MYARICK is going to step in as the tight end over here in New York. And he's a guy we don't know much about. And he's a guy who's obviously never played an expanded role in the NFL. So it's a wait-and-see approach, and he's a sit this week. And now to the Seattle Seahawks side of things. They run with a lot of tight ends, 3 or 4 tight end sets we see a lot in Seattle. And we might see it even more now if DK Metcalf is going to miss time, which it looks like he will. But anyway, Noah Fant, he hasn't done much to garner value each and every week. He's a sit. And Will Disley had 3 good weeks to begin the year, but now he's been quiet. So this game, both tight ends on teams are sits. Now to the Niners at the Los Angeles Rams. George Kittle, the last 2 weeks, he's looking healthier. And now with Christian McCaffrey in the offense, things are going to open up even more, I think, for this passing game. So George Kittle, he's back to putting up elite numbers the last couple weeks here at tight end, and he's a start, even in the tougher matchup versus the Rams. And now Tyler Higbee, he's been a top 8 tight end this season here, and a guy I would start as well. He's a second favorite target of Stafford behind Cooper Kupp. I know Allen Robinson scored a touchdown before their bye week, which was good to see, and Von Jefferson should be back in this ball game. But right now, Tyler Higbee is the number 2 option in that passing game still until further notice. And I got him as a start this week. Now to the Commanders at the Colts right here. Logan Thomas, we haven't seen him in weeks. And even if he does play in this game, you can't trust him. He's a sit. And MOREAU, Cox, and Jelani Woods, we've seen some flashes from them this season. But now with Matt Ryan out of the offense, we just got to see what Sam Ehlinger is going to do with a lot of pieces. So right here in this game, only in deepest of leagues, maybe I would trust in the MOREAU, Cox, or Jelani Woods. But I got him in sits this week. Now to the Packers at the Buffalo Bills. So Robert Tonyan, it's been one good game, one bad game type of performance. And last week, he really didn't do anything until the fourth quarter, where the last play of the game, where they tried a lot of laterals and stuff, he caught a 15, 20-yard pass to end the ball game. And besides that, the targets were down. So I know a few weeks ago versus the Jets, he had a monster game with 10 catches for 90 yards. But Robert Tonyan right now, tough matchup. Targets aren't there. I don't trust anyone in this Packer passing game, really. He's a borderline option at best. And now to the Buffalo Bills side of things, Dawson Knox, it's been a tough season for him, no doubt about it. He did find the end zone in their last ball game versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But he's still a guy I'm not going to really rely on here is Dawson Knox. We know the Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, top 2 targets on the team. Devin Singletary does good work out of the backfield receiving. And right now, Dawson Knox, I have as a sit this week. And now on to the Monday Night Football game. Cincinnati Bengals at Cleveland Browns to close it out. So Hayden Hurst, he's been a decent fantasy option over the last few weeks. I know he had a dud ball game in week 6, but besides that, he's getting targets, making plays in the middle of the field. And Joe Burrow's on fire right now in midseason form over the last 2 weeks, especially in week 7, going for 481 yards passing and 4 total touchdowns. So he's spreading the ball around his Burrow, and it's a pretty solid matchup here for the Bengals. So I got Hurst as a start, and now David Njoku, he's out obviously for a while, 2 to 5 weeks with a high ankle sprain. And Harrison Bryant's going to step into that tight end role. And we got to wait and see. I know Bryant, over the last few years when he's gotten the spot starts, has been a decent tight end. But right now, we'll see if him and Jacoby Brissett have a good rapport. So I would take a wait-and-see approach with Bryant. Obviously, if you want to stash him and put him on your roster, that's fine. But as a guy to throw out there as a start, I'm not ready to do that this week. And I have him as a sit. So that's the Week 8 matchups at tight ends. Starts as sits for every game of fantasy football season.